I never thought a single impulsive kiss would sign my death warrant, or make me the obsession of the city's most dangerous man. But when I grabbed the stranger in the expensive suit and pressed my lips to his in the middle of that crowded club, I had no idea I was kissing Dante Moretti, the man they whispered about in fear, the Mafia boss who owned half the city and every soul in it. And looking back now, I can see how that one moment of reckless desperation changed the entire trajectory of my life in ways I couldn't have imagined even in my wildest, darkest dreams. It started like any other Friday night, where I was trying to convince myself that I was finally over Marcus Chen, my ex-boyfriend who had spent the last 3 years systematically destroying my self-esteem with his perfectly calculated blend of charm and cruelty. The kind of toxic manipulation that leaves you questioning your own reality, while he smiled at you, like he was doing you a favor by staying, and my best friend Jessica had insisted that we go out to Eclipse, the most exclusive club downtown, the kind of place where the velvet ropes and intimidating bouncers kept out anyone who didn't have money or connections, or the kind of beauty that turned heads from across the room. Jessica had pulled every string she had to get us on the list, calling in favors from her cousin who knew someone who worked for the owner, and she'd spent 2 hours doing my makeup and forcing me into a black dress that hugged every curve of my body in a way that made me feel exposed and powerful all at once. The kind of dress that Marcus would have told me was too much, too attention-seeking, too desperate. But Jessica had looked at me with her fierce brown eyes and said that I needed to remember what it felt like to be a woman who wasn't constantly apologizing for taking up space in the world, and I had stared at my reflection in her full-length mirror and barely recognized the confident stranger looking back at me. The club was everything I expected and more. All pulsing bass that I could feel vibrating through my chest and LED lights that painted the crowd in shades of electric blue and deep purple. The air thick with expensive perfume and the sharp tang of top-shelf alcohol. And everywhere I looked, there were beautiful people moving like they owned the night. Like they'd never known what it felt like to be small, or scared, or unsure of their place in the world. And I had just started to relax into the anonymity of the crowd, letting the music drown out the constant anxiety that Marcus had planted in my head when I saw him across the room, and my entire body went cold despite the heat of hundreds of bodies pressed together in the manufactured darkness. Marcus was standing near the bar with his arm draped possessively around some blonde girl in a red dress that barely covered anything, and he was laughing at something she said, his head thrown back in that performative way he had when he wanted everyone to see how much fun he was having, how desired he was, how he'd already moved on to someone new and exciting while his ex-girlfriend was probably at home crying into her pillow. And the worst part was that he'd seen me too. I could tell by the way his eyes had locked onto mine for just a second before he deliberately pulled the blonde closer and kissed her neck, his gaze never leaving my face as he watched for my reaction with that familiar smirk that said he knew exactly what he was doing to me. Jessica grabbed my arm and started pulling me toward the bathroom, muttering about what a manipulative piece of trash he was and how we should just leave. But something inside me snapped in that moment. Something that had been bending and breaking under the weight of Marcus's psychological games for 3 years, and I realized that I was so tired of letting him have this power over me, so exhausted from the cycle of him pushing me away and then pulling me back whenever he felt like I was finally moving on. And I knew with sudden clarity that if I let him see me run away tonight, if I let him watch me retreat with tears in my eyes like I had so many times before, I would never be free of him, because he would always know that he could hurt me whenever he wanted. That's when I saw him standing near the VIP section that was cordoned off with more velvet ropes and guarded by men in black suits who looked like they could break bones without breaking a sweat. A man who was so breathtakingly handsome that for a moment I forgot why my heart was racing, forgot about Marcus and the blonde, and the 3 years of my life I'd wasted on someone who saw me as a toy to play with whenever he got bored. And this stranger was tall, at least 6'3", with dark hair that was styled perfectly, and a jawline that could have been carved from marble, wearing a 3-piece suit that probably cost more than my rent for 6 months. The kind of suit that whispered wealth and power without needing to announce it to anyone who mattered. He was holding a glass of what looked like whiskey and talking to a group of men who all seemed to hang on his every word. Their body language deferential in a way that suggested this wasn't just respect, but something deeper, something that looked almost like fear mixed with absolute loyalty. And even from across the club, I could see the way people moved around him, giving him space without even realizing they were doing it. Like there was an invisible force field that separated him from everyone else in the room, and I watched as a woman in a designer dress approached him with a sultry smile, and he dismissed her with barely a glance. His attention focused on whatever his companion was saying with an intensity that made me wonder what it would feel like to have all that focus directed at me. I didn't think about what I was doing, didn't let myself pause long enough to talk myself out of it, because I knew if I hesitated for even a second, I would lose my nerve and end up doing exactly what Marcus expected. So I pulled away from Jessica's grip and started walking across the club toward this beautiful stranger. My heels clicking against the floor with a confidence I didn't actually feel. My heart hammering so hard against my ribs that I was sure everyone could hear it over the music. And I was vaguely aware of Jessica calling my name behind me, but I couldn't stop now. Couldn't let myself think about consequences or common sense or the fact that I was about to kiss a complete stranger, just to prove a point to a man who didn't deserve another second of my emotional energy. The men in suits who were guarding the VIP section started to move toward me as I approached, their hands going to weapons I couldn't see but somehow knew were there. But I was already too close, already reaching for the stranger's perfectly tailored jacket, with hands that were shaking just slightly. And I saw his steel-gray eyes widen in surprise as I grabbed the lapels of his jacket and pulled myself up onto my toes and pressed my lips to his before he could say a word, before his bodyguards could pull me away, before I could lose my courage and run back to the safety of being invisible and forgettable and perpetually heartbroken. For just a moment, maybe half a second that felt like an eternity, he went completely still, his body rigid with shock. And I thought maybe I'd made a terrible mistake. Maybe he would push me away, or his men would drag me out of the club, and I would become one of those cautionary tales that people told about drunk girls who didn't know their place. But then something shifted. Something dark and hungry and absolutely devastating, and his large hand slid around my waist with a possessiveness that took my breath away, pulling me flush against his body as he took complete control of the kiss, his mouth claiming mine with a skill and intensity that made my knees actually go weak, made me forget that this was supposed to be performative, that I was using him to make Marcus jealous and nothing more. He kissed me like he was trying to memorize the taste of me, like he had every right to be doing this, like I belonged to him already, and this was just confirmation of something we both should have known. And his other hand came up to cup the back of my neck, his fingers sliding into my hair, and I heard myself make a sound that I didn't recognize, something between a gasp and a moan, and I was kissing him back with an urgency that had nothing to do with Marcus, and everything to do with the way this stranger's body felt against mine, solid and powerful, and absolutely in control in a way that should have scared me, but instead made me feel safer than I had in years. When we finally broke apart, I was breathing hard, my lips swollen and my mind spinning, and I realized that the entire club had gone almost silent. Or maybe it was just that my ears were ringing so loudly that I couldn't hear the music anymore, and I looked up into his face and saw something flash in those steel-gray eyes, something dark and possessive and deeply satisfied, like I'd just given him something precious without meaning to. And his thumb came up to brush across my bottom lip, the gesture both tender and claiming, and he murmured in a voice that was like gravel and silk and sin all wrapped together, "Do you have any idea who you just kissed, Bella?" The endearment rolled off his tongue in what I realized was an Italian accent, slight but definitely there, adding another layer of dangerous sophistication to a man who already seemed like he existed in a different stratosphere from people like me. And I was about to say something, maybe apologize or laugh it off, or pretend like this was exactly what I'd meant to do, when one of his men, a muscular guy with a scar running down his left cheek, leaned in close and whispered something in his ear that I couldn't quite catch. And I watched as the stranger's expression shifted from amused interest to something that looked almost predatory, his eyes never leaving mine as whatever was being said registered in his mind. That's when I remembered Marcus. Remembered that this whole insane stunt was supposed to be about making him jealous, and I turned my head to look across the club to where he'd been standing with the blonde, expecting to see anger or hurt or at least some kind of reaction that would make all this worth it. But what I saw instead made my blood run cold, because Marcus's face was completely pale, drained of all color, and he looked genuinely terrified for the first time in the 3 years I'd known him, his eyes wide with something that looked like absolute horror. And the blonde next to him was staring at me too, her mouth hanging open, and I realized that everyone in our immediate vicinity was staring at us with expressions that ranged from shock to fear to a kind of morbid fascination, like they were watching a car crash happen in slow motion. I looked back at the stranger, this man I'd just kissed so desperately, and I saw that he was watching my face with an intensity that made me feel like he could read every thought racing through my mind, and his hand was still on my waist, warm and possessive and absolutely confident, and he smiled at me. But it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator who'd just realized that prey had willingly walked into his trap, and he said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, his voice carrying that note of absolute authority that made it clear he was used to being obeyed without question. "She's mine now." The words sent a shiver down my spine that was equal parts terror, and something I didn't want to examine too closely, and I watched in growing horror as 2 of his men immediately detached themselves from the group and started walking purposefully toward Marcus, their expressions blank, but their intent absolutely clear. And Marcus actually stumbled backward, knocking into the bar, his earlier confidence completely shattered. And I wanted to say something, wanted to tell this stranger that it was all a mistake, that I didn't mean anything by the kiss, that I was just trying to make my ex-boyfriend jealous and I was sorry for using him like that. But the words died in my throat because his gray eyes were locked on mine with an intensity that made it impossible to look away, impossible to think clearly, impossible to do anything but stand there and try to understand what the hell I'd just done. "Wait," I finally managed to say, my voice coming out breathier than I intended. "I don't understand what's happening. I just wanted to—" But he cut me off by pressing his thumb gently against my lips, the gesture intimate and silencing all at once, and he leaned down so his mouth was right next to my ear, his breath warm against my skin as he said in that accent that was doing dangerous things to my common sense, "You kissed Dante Moretti, Bella, and in my world that means something, whether you intended it to or not." The name meant nothing to me at first, just syllables that sounded beautiful in his accent. But then I saw the way everyone around us had taken an unconscious step back, the way his men were watching me with something that looked like a mixture of curiosity and concern, and I heard Jessica's voice from somewhere behind me, high-pitched with panic, saying, "Oh my God, Aria, do you know what you just did? Do you know who he is?" And I realized with dawning horror that I had somehow managed to kiss someone important, someone dangerous, someone whose name made grown men look afraid, and all I could think was, what the hell have I done? What the hell have I done? What the hell have I done? Before I could apologize or run or do anything remotely rational, Dante's hand tightened on my waist. Not painfully, but firmly enough that I understood I wasn't going anywhere unless he decided to let me go. And he was still looking at me with those devastating gray eyes that seemed to see right through all my defenses, all my carefully constructed walls. And I watched in complete shock as his men reached Marcus and grabbed him by both arms, starting to drag him toward the exit, while Marcus struggled and protested, and looked back at me with an expression that was begging me to help him, to save him from whatever punishment he thought was coming. And the last thing I saw before Dante turned my face back to his with gentle but insistent fingers on my chin was Marcus disappearing through the crowd. And all I could think was that I'd wanted to make him jealous, wanted to hurt him the way he'd hurt me so many times. But I'd never wanted this. Never wanted to see him actually afraid for his safety. And now I had no idea how to undo what I'd started, or if it was even possible to go back to the moment before I'd made the most reckless decision of my entire life. Dante Moretti doesn't let me leave the club. And I realize with growing panic that when a man like him says you're his, he means it in a way that goes far beyond the casual possessiveness I'd grown accustomed to with Marcus. Because instead of releasing me after the shock of the kiss wears off, Dante's hand remains firmly on the small of my back as he guides me through the crowd that parts for us like the Red Sea. Everyone's eyes following our progress with a mixture of fear and fascination. And I can hear Jessica calling my name somewhere behind me, but when I try to turn back, Dante's fingers press just slightly harder against my spine, not hurting, but definitely communicating that he's not going to let me run away from whatever this is, whatever I've accidentally gotten myself into by kissing the most dangerous man in the city. He leads me up a staircase I hadn't even noticed before, one that's guarded by 2 more men in expensive suits, who nod respectfully at Dante and don't even glance at me, as if women being escorted upstairs by their boss is so common it doesn't warrant acknowledgement. And I want to protest, want to dig my heels in and demand that he let me go back to my normal, safe, boring life where the most dangerous thing I dealt with was my toxic ex-boyfriend's mind games. But there's something about the way Dante moves, the absolute confidence in every step, the certainty that the world will bend to his will because it always has, that makes me follow him even as every rational part of my brain is screaming at me to run. We enter a private room that overlooks the entire club through floor-to-ceiling windows that are clearly one-way glass, because I can see everything happening below, but nobody can see us. And the space is decorated in dark leather and rich wood, all masculine elegance and understated wealth, with a full bar against one wall and seating areas that look more expensive than everything I own put together. And the music from downstairs is just a distant thrum up here, muted enough that I can hear my own heart pounding in my ears as Dante finally releases me and walks over to pour himself another whiskey. His movements unhurried and graceful, like he has all the time in the world and he knows I'm not going anywhere because where would I even go? "Sit," he says, gesturing to one of the leather couches. And it's not exactly a command, but it's definitely not a request either. And I find myself obeying even though I want to stay standing, want to maintain some illusion of control over this situation that is rapidly spiraling beyond anything I can manage. And I perch on the edge of the couch with my hands clasped in my lap, feeling like a teenager who's been called to the principal's office, except the principal is devastatingly handsome and possibly a criminal, and I'm the one who walked into his office willingly by kissing him in front of hundreds of witnesses. Dante turns to face me, leaning against the bar with his whiskey glass cradled in one large hand, and he's studying me with an intensity that makes me feel completely exposed, like he's reading every secret I've ever kept, every insecurity Marcus planted in my head, every desperate hope I've buried under layers of self-protection. And I realize that his eyes aren't just gray, but have flecks of silver in them that catch the low lighting, making them look almost metallic, predatory, like a wolf watching prey and deciding whether to pounce or play with it first. "What's your name, Bella?" he asks, his accent wrapping around the endearment in a way that makes it sound like a caress. And I tell him, "Aria Bennett," because lying seems pointless when he could probably find out everything about me with a single phone call. And he repeats it slowly, thoughtfully, like he's tasting each syllable, and then he says, "Aria, that's beautiful. It means air, breath, life. And I'm wondering if you realize that you just breathed new life into a very dangerous situation by kissing me in front of everyone in my club." I open my mouth to explain about Marcus, about the 3 years of manipulation and gaslighting, about how I just wanted to hurt him the way he'd hurt me, and Dante was convenient and handsome, and I'm so sorry for using him like that. But the words come out all jumbled and desperate, tumbling over each other in my rush to make him understand that I didn't know who he was, that if I'd known I never would have been so reckless. And he listens to my rambling explanation with an expression that gives nothing away, just watching me with those intense eyes while occasionally sipping his whiskey. And when I finally run out of words and breath, he sets his glass down and walks toward me with the kind of predatory grace that makes my pulse spike. He sits down next to me on the couch, close enough that I can smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that reminds me of cedar and spice, and he reaches out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. The gesture surprisingly gentle for a man who radiates such controlled danger. And he says in that voice that does things to me I don't want to acknowledge, "Let me tell you what I see, Arya. I see a beautiful woman who's been letting some insignificant boy make her feel small, who walked into my club tonight looking like she was trying to disappear into the walls, and then something in her snapped, and she did the bravest, most reckless thing she's probably ever done, and now she's terrified because she's realizing that actions have consequences, especially when those actions involve me." His assessment is so accurate it makes my chest tight, makes me feel like I'm standing naked in front of him emotionally, and I want to deny it, want to pretend that I'm not that pathetic, that Marcus didn't systematically destroy my confidence over 3 years of on-and-off toxicity. But Dante's looking at me with something that might be understanding, mixed with that predatory interest, and I find myself asking the question that's been burning in my mind since his men dragged Marcus away. "What are you going to do to him? To Marcus? Please don't hurt him. He's awful, but he doesn't deserve to be—" And Dante cuts me off by pressing his finger to my lips, the touch sending an electric current through my entire body. "Your ex-boyfriend," Dante says, and there's something dark in his tone now, something that makes me understand why people fear him. Has been dealing cocaine in my territory without my permission, has been stealing from me, undercutting my prices and thinking I wouldn't notice because he's small-time and insignificant. And normally when someone does that, when someone shows me that level of disrespect, I make an example of them so that everyone else in this city remembers who owns these streets and what happens when you forget. The casual way he talks about violence, about owning territory, and making examples of people should horrify me more than it does. But I'm distracted by the revelation that Marcus was dealing drugs, that his mysterious income and erratic behavior and paranoia weren't just symptoms of his toxic personality, but evidence of actual criminal activity. And I realized that I didn't really know him at all, that I'd been in love with a fantasy version of who I thought he was, while ignoring all the red flags that were practically on fire in front of my face. "But," Dante continues, his thumb now tracing the curve of my jaw with a gentleness that contradicts everything else about this situation, "you kissed me. You claimed me first even if you didn't know what you were doing. And that changes things because now I have to decide what to do with the man who clearly hurt someone I've suddenly found myself very interested in protecting. And I'm going to give you a choice, Arya. I'm going to let you decide what happens to Marcus Chen. And whatever you choose will tell me everything I need to know about whether you can handle my world or if I should let you walk out of here and forget this ever happened." The weight of that choice settles over me like a physical thing, heavy and suffocating, because on one hand, Marcus is my ex-boyfriend, someone I spent 3 years of my life with, someone who I thought I loved even when he was making me miserable, and on the other hand, he's apparently a drug dealer who's been stealing from the Mafia, and Dante is offering me the power to determine his fate. And I don't know if this is a test or a genuine offer, or some kind of manipulation that I'm too naive to recognize, but I find myself asking in a voice that sounds steadier than I feel, "What are my options?" Dante's lips curve into a smile that's equal parts approving and dangerous, like I've just passed some kind of preliminary examination, and he leans back against the couch, his arm stretching along the back behind my shoulders in a way that's casually possessive. And he says, "Option 1? I let him go with a warning. Tell him to stay out of my territory and away from you. And he probably ignores both instructions within a month because men like him don't learn lessons easily. Or option 2. I make him disappear permanently, quickly and cleanly, and you never have to worry about him manipulating you or showing up with other women or any of the other psychological warfare he's clearly been waging against you for years. Or option 3. I keep him alive, but make sure he understands the consequences of crossing me. Make sure he's too afraid to ever come near you again, or deal drugs in my city, or do anything except wake up grateful every morning that I decided to show mercy." I should be horrified by the fact that he's offering to kill Marcus like it's as simple as choosing what to have for dinner, should be running from this room and this man and this whole situation as fast as my heels can carry me. But instead, I'm thinking about all the times Marcus made me feel worthless. All the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering what I'd done wrong, all the times he'd ghost me for weeks, and then show up at my door like nothing happened, and I realize that I want option 3. Want him to be scared. Want him to understand what it feels like to be powerless and afraid and uncertain. And when I tell Dante this, my voice is surprisingly firm, surprisingly certain, and I watch something shift in his expression. Something that looks almost like respect. "You're stronger than you think you are, Aria Bennett," Dante says, and the way he says my full name makes it sound like a promise, like he's committing it to memory. And then his hand is cupping my face and he's looking at me with an intensity that steals my breath. And he continues, "I saw you the moment you walked into my club tonight, before you even noticed your ex-boyfriend, before you made your impulsive decision to use me for revenge. And I couldn't look away, because there was something about you, something bright and real in a world full of people who are just playing roles and wearing masks. And when you kissed me, when you touched me first, it felt like fate giving me something I didn't even know I was looking for." His words should sound like a line, like something a man says to manipulate a woman into trusting him. But there's a rawness in his voice that makes me believe him, makes me think that maybe this terrifyingly powerful man is just as confused by this connection between us as I am. And when he leans in slowly, giving me plenty of time to pull away, plenty of time to say no, I find myself tilting my face up to meet him halfway. And this kiss is different from the one downstairs. It's slower and deeper and more deliberate. Like he's trying to learn everything about me through the touch of his lips and the slide of his tongue. And I'm kissing him back with a desperate kind of hunger that has nothing to do with making anyone jealous, and everything to do with the way his hand feels tangled in my hair, and the way his other arm has wrapped around my waist to pull me onto his lap, and the way I feel safer in the arms of a Mafia boss than I ever felt with the man I thought I loved. When we break apart this time, I'm straddling his lap, and his hands are on my hips, and we're both breathing hard. And I can feel exactly how much he wants me pressing against me through his expensive suit pants. And the rational part of my brain is screaming that this is insane, that I've known this man for less than an hour, that he's dangerous and powerful and completely outside the realm of anything I understand. But the rest of me, the part that Marcus spent 3 years trying to break, is whispering that this is what it's supposed to feel like. This all-consuming attraction, this feeling of being wanted and seen and chosen. And when Dante's phone rings, shattering the moment, I actually whimper in protest. And he smiles against my neck where he's been trailing kisses that make my toes curl. Dante answers the phone with obvious reluctance, his free hand still holding my hip to keep me in place on his lap. And he speaks in rapid Italian, his voice taking on a harder edge. And I don't understand the words, but I understand the tone. Understand that something bad has happened, something that requires his immediate attention. And when he ends the call and looks at me, there's regret in his eyes mixed with that dangerous intensity. And he says, "I need to handle something urgent, but I'm not letting you out of my sight because as of tonight, as of the moment you kissed me in front of everyone, you became mine to protect, and my enemies are going to hear about what happened and they're going to wonder if they can use you against me. The implication that I'm now in danger because of one impulsive kiss makes my blood run cold, makes the reality of what I've done crash over me like a wave, and I'm about to protest, about to say that this is all moving too fast and I need time to think, when Dante gently lifts me off his lap and stands, straightening his suit with practiced efficiency, and he pulls out his phone and makes another call, this one in English, telling someone named Luca to bring the car around and to make sure Jessica gets home safely with 2 of his men as escort. And I realize that he's been tracking my best friend this whole time, making sure she was safe even while he was focused on me. And something about that casual display of power and protection makes my stomach flip. Dante holds out his hand to me, and I can see in his eyes that he's giving me a choice, that I can refuse, that I can walk away from this whole insane situation, and he'll let me go, He'll make sure Marcus stays away from me and that I'm safe, but I'll never see him again, never feel this intensity again, never know what it's like to be chosen by a man who looks at me like I'm the only thing in the world worth protecting. And I think about going back to my small apartment, and my freelance graphic design work, and my quiet life where the most exciting thing that happens is trying a new coffee shop. And I realize that I don't want that anymore. Don't want to be safe and small and forgettable. And so I take his hand and let him pull me to my feet. And the smile he gives me is devastating in its approval. We're walking toward the door, Dante's hand possessively on my lower back again, when the windows behind us explode inward in a shower of glass, and I hear the sharp crack of gunshots, and everything happens so fast that I can barely process it as Dante shoves me hard behind him, his body becoming a shield between me and whoever is shooting at us. And he's pulling a gun from inside his jacket, with the kind of practiced ease that tells me this isn't the first time someone's tried to kill him. Probably not even the first time this week. And I'm crouching behind the couch where he pushed me, my hands over my ears, my entire body shaking with adrenaline and terror. And I can hear him returning fire, can hear him shouting orders in Italian to his men. And all I can think is that I'm going to die in a private club room wearing Jessica's borrowed dress because I made one stupid, impulsive decision to kiss a stranger. The gunfire seems to go on forever, but is probably only 30 seconds. And then there's silence except for the blaring alarm and the sounds of chaos from downstairs where the club has clearly erupted into panic. And Dante is beside me immediately, his hands running over me checking for injuries, his face harder than I've seen it. All traces of the gentle seducer gone and replaced by the cold Mafia boss that everyone fears. And when he's satisfied that I'm not hurt, he pulls me to my feet and says in a voice that brooks no argument, "We need to leave now. Stay close to me. Don't let go of my hand no matter what you see. Do you understand?" I nod, because I can't seem to form words, my entire body numb with shock. And Dante keeps me tucked against his side as we move through the club. And I try not to look at the bodies on the floor. Try not to think about the fact that people died tonight, and it's because of me. Because I kissed Dante Moretti and made myself a target. And we make it to his car, which is a sleek black Mercedes that's clearly armored based on how heavy the door is. And his driver is already behind the wheel looking calm despite the fact that they just survived an assassination attempt. And as Dante slides in next to me and the car takes off into the night, he pulls me against his chest, his heart racing against my cheek, and he murmurs in Italian, something that sounds like a prayer or a promise. And then he switches to English and says, "Welcome to my world, Bella. You're mine to protect now. And I promise you that whoever just tried to take you from me will regret it for however long they have left to live." And I realize as we speed through the empty streets, with his arms wrapped around me like steel bands, that I've crossed a threshold I can never step back over. That my life, before tonight, is gone, and all I can do is hold on to Dante Moretti and hope that being claimed by the most dangerous man in the city doesn't end up being the last decision I ever make. I wake up in Dante Moretti's bed, and for a disorienting moment I think maybe the entire night was just some kind of fever dream brought on by too many cocktails and too much desperation to hurt Marcus. But then I feel the expensive Egyptian cotton sheets against my skin and see the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city from what must be at least 40 stories up. And I remember with crystalline clarity the gunfire and the shattered glass and the way Dante's body had covered mine without hesitation, willing to take a bullet for a woman he'd known for less than 2 hours. And I'm not sure what terrifies me more, that someone just tried to kill us both last night, or that when Dante pulled me against his body in the back of his bulletproof car, his heart racing against mine, I felt safer than I've ever felt in my life. And I think I'm starting to crave the danger he represents in a way that should probably concern me, but instead just makes me want to find him and make sure he's real and alive and still looking at me with those intense gray eyes. The bedroom is massive. All modern masculine elegance with dark wood furniture and charcoal walls that somehow don't feel oppressive but rather cocooning. And there's abstract art that probably costs more than my student loans hanging on the walls. And I realize I'm wearing one of Dante's shirts, soft black cotton that falls to my mid-thigh. and I have a vague memory of him bringing me here last night, and one of his female staff members helping me out of Jessica's ruined dress and into something comfortable while he stood guard outside the door, and the tenderness of that gesture. The way he made sure I was taken care of even in the chaos of an assassination attempt makes my chest feel tight with emotions I'm not ready to examine. I slide out of bed and pad barefoot across the heated floors toward the door, which opens into a hallway that looks like it belongs in an architecture magazine, all clean lines and carefully curated art. And I follow the sound of voices speaking in rapid Italian until I find myself standing in the doorway of what appears to be Dante's home office. And he's there behind an enormous desk made of dark wood and glass, wearing fitted black pants and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms that are corded with muscle and decorated with what looks like the edge of a tattoo disappearing under the fabric. And he's talking on the phone with an intensity that makes his entire body look coiled and ready to strike. And I find myself frozen in place just watching him, this beautiful, dangerous man who somehow decided I belong to him. He sees me standing there and something in his expression softens immediately, the hard edges of the Mafia boss melting away to reveal something warmer underneath. And he says something sharp and final in Italian before ending the call and standing up. And he's moving around the desk toward me with that predatory grace that makes my pulse spike. And before I can say anything, he's cupping my face in both hands and kissing me like he needs to reassure himself that I'm real and whole and still here. And I'm kissing him back with equal desperation, my hands fisting in his shirt. And when we finally break apart, we're both breathing hard, and he's resting his forehead against mine and murmuring, "I'm sorry you woke up alone. I've been dealing with the aftermath of last night, making sure the people who attacked us understand what a fatal mistake they made." The casual mention of retaliation should probably bother me more than it does, but I'm distracted by the way his thumbs are stroking my cheekbones and the way he's looking at me like I'm something precious he needs to protect. And I find myself asking, who were they, the people who shot at us, and why did they do it? And Dante's expression darkens, his jaw clenching with barely contained rage, and he takes my hand and leads me over to a leather couch against one wall, pulling me down to sit next to him. And I realize that he needs the contact as much as I do, needs to be touching me to reassure himself that I survived the violence of his world. "The Baldini family," Dante says, and his voice has taken on that cold edge that makes me understand why people fear him. They're a rival organization that's been trying to take my territory for the past 5 years, ever since their father died and his idiot sons took over and decided that peace wasn't as profitable as war. And when word got out last night that I'd publicly claimed a woman, that I'd called you mine in front of witnesses, they saw an opportunity to hurt me by taking you away, to show that I'm vulnerable, that caring about someone makes me weak. The idea that I'm now a target because Dante cares about me, because one impulsive kiss led to him deciding I was worth protecting, makes me feel dizzy with the implications, and I'm about to suggest that maybe I should just go home, that this is all too much too fast and I'm clearly not equipped to handle being the weakness of a mafia boss. But Dante must see the panic in my eyes because he pulls me onto his lap, arranging me so I'm straddling him with my knees on either side of his hips, and his hands are on my waist under his shirt I'm wearing, warm and possessive against my bare skin, and he says in a voice that's both gentle and absolutely firm, "You're not leaving, Arya. I can see you thinking about running, about going back to your safe little life where the biggest danger was your toxic ex-boyfriend. But you need to understand something. The moment you kissed me, the moment everyone in that club saw you choose me, you became part of my world whether we like it or not. And the only way I can keep you safe is if you stay, here with me where I can protect you." I want to argue, want to insist that I'm not his responsibility, that one kiss doesn't mean he owns me or has any right to dictate where I live, but the rational part of my brain knows he's right, knows that I painted a target on my own back the moment I decided to use the most dangerous man in the city for my petty revenge against Marcus. And besides, if I'm being completely honest with myself, I don't actually want to leave. Don't want to walk away from whatever this intense connection is between us. And so instead of protesting, I ask, "What happened to Marcus? Is he?" And I can't quite finish the question because I'm not sure I want to know the answer. Dante's expression shifts to something that might be amusement mixed with approval, and he reaches up to tuck my hair behind my ear in that gesture that's becoming familiar. And he says, "Your ex-boyfriend is currently being held at one of my warehouses on the south side, and I've had some very interesting conversations with him about his drug-dealing activities and his treatment of you, and I have to say, Arya, it took considerable restraint on my part not to kill him, just for the way he made you feel worthless for 3 years. But I remember what you asked for. You wanted him scared but alive. And so that's what I'm giving you." The casual way he talks about having Marcus imprisoned makes this whole situation feel surreal. Like I've stepped into some kind of crime novel where the protagonist falls for the dangerous anti-hero. Except, this is my actual life now, and the man whose lap I'm sitting on actually has the power to make people disappear. And I should be horrified, but instead I'm asking, can I see him? Can I talk to him? Because I think I need closure. I need to look him in the eye and tell him that I'm done letting him have any power over me. And Dante studies my face for a long moment, before nodding slowly. And he says, "We'll go later today after he handles some business." And then his hands are sliding up my ribcage and his mouth is on my neck, and I'm forgetting all about Marcus as Dante kisses a path along my jaw. The phone on his desk rings, shattering the moment, and Dante curses in Italian, something that sounds creative and extremely profane. But he gently lifts me off his lap and goes to answer it. And I take the opportunity to actually look around his office, at the expensive artwork, and the bookshelf full of leather-bound volumes in multiple languages, and the bar cart in the corner that holds bottles of alcohol that probably cost more than my monthly rent. And I'm starting to understand the scope of Dante's wealth and power, starting to comprehend that this isn't just some street-level criminal, but someone who operates at the highest levels of organized crime. And the thought should send me running. But instead, I find myself wondering what it would be like to be the woman who stands beside a man like this, who shares his world and his bed and his dangerous life. Dante finishes his call and tells me that his chef will prepare breakfast for us, and that afterward he wants to show me something. And he takes my hand and leads me through his penthouse, which I'm now realizing is actually the entire top floor of this building, and it's decorated with the kind of tasteful luxury that comes from having money and knowing how to spend it. All neutral colors and expensive furniture and windows that offer breathtaking views of the city sprawling below us. And I think about my cramped studio apartment, with its leaky faucet and temperamental heating, and realize that I've stepped into a completely different world. One where money is no object and danger is just another fact of daily life. The kitchen is enormous, all marble countertops and professional-grade appliances, and there's a man in chef's whites already preparing food, and Dante introduces him as Giovanni, who's been with his family for 20 years, and Giovanni gives me a warm smile and a knowing look that suggests he's aware of exactly what happened last night, and approves of his boss finally showing interest in a woman. And within minutes we're sitting at a breakfast bar, eating the most incredible omelet I've ever tasted, filled with truffle and aged cheese and herbs I can't identify. And Dante is watching me eat with an intensity that makes me self-conscious until he says, "You're beautiful, do you know that? Not just physically, although you're stunning. But there's something about the way you experience things, like you're really present in every moment, really alive, and I find myself wanting to give you experiences just so I can watch you react to them." His words make me blush, make me feel seen in a way that Marcus never managed in 3 years. And I'm about to respond when a woman walks into the kitchen, tall and elegant with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and wearing a designer suit that probably costs more than my car. And she stops short when she sees me, her perfectly made-up eyes widening slightly, and Dante stands immediately and says, "Arya, this is Isabella, my second in command, and the person who actually runs most of my legitimate businesses." And Isabella recovers quickly, extending her hand to me with a professional smile. But I can see the questions in her eyes. The surprise that Dante has a woman in his home wearing his shirt. Isabella and Dante have a brief conversation in Italian. Something about meetings and shipments and people whose names I don't recognize. and I use the time to study her, to wonder what it takes to be a woman in Dante's organization, to command respect in a world dominated by dangerous men. And when she leaves with a final appraising look at me, Dante turns back and says, "She's protective of me. She's seen too many women try to use their connection to me for money or status or leverage, but she'll come around when she realizes you're different, that you didn't even know who I was when you kissed me." After breakfast, Dante takes me to a room I didn't see in my wandering earlier. And when he opens the door, I'm stunned to find what looks like a professional art studio, with easels and canvases and paints organized in careful rows. And he explains that this was his mother's space before she died 10 years ago, that she was a painter who found beauty in dark things. And he's kept the room exactly as she left it, a shrine to the woman who taught him that even in a world of violence and crime, there had to be room for creation and beauty. And the tenderness in his voice when he talks about her makes my chest ache, makes me see past the dangerous mafia boss to the man underneath who loved his mother and still misses her. Dante shows me some of his mother's paintings, dark abstracts that somehow convey both violence and grace. And he tells me about growing up in this world, about watching his father get murdered when he was 17, and having to step up and take control of an organization that was fracturing and under attack from all sides. And he says that he learned early that showing weakness gets people killed, that caring about someone makes you vulnerable, and that's why he's never let anyone get close, never let anyone matter enough to be used against him. But something about me, about the way I kissed him without knowing who he was, makes him want to take that risk, makes him want to see what it's like to have someone who's his because they chose him, not because of his power or money or name. His confession is raw and honest and completely unexpected, and I find myself responding with my own truth, telling him about Marcus and the 3 years of manipulation, about how I lost myself trying to be whatever he wanted me to be, about how I'm only now starting to remember who I was before I met him. And Dante listens with an intensity that makes me feel heard in a way I never have before. And when I'm done talking, he pulls me against his chest and just holds me, his chin resting on top of my head. And he murmurs that Marcus was an idiot who didn't deserve me, that anyone who had me and treated me like I was disposable is a fool. And I find myself believing him because, unlike Marcus's empty flattery that was always deployed strategically to manipulate me, Dante's words feel solid and real, and backed by the kind of conviction that comes from a man who never says anything he doesn't mean. We spend the rest of the morning in comfortable companionship, Dante working on his laptop while I curl up on his office couch with a book from his extensive library. And there's something domestic and peaceful about it that feels surreal given the violence of last night. But I'm learning that this is part of his world too. These moments of quiet normalcy sandwiched between bursts of danger and chaos. And I'm surprised by how easily I'm adapting. How quickly this penthouse is starting to feel less like a prison, and more like a sanctuary from the ordinary world I left behind. In the early afternoon, Dante tells me it's time to go see Marcus if I still want to, and he has one of his staff members bring me clothes in my size, designer jeans and a soft cashmere sweater that fits perfectly. And I don't ask how he knew my measurements, or how he managed to get an entire wardrobe delivered in a matter of hours, because I'm starting to understand that when you're Dante Moretti, the impossible becomes routine. And he drives us himself in a different car, a black SUV that's also clearly armored, and his hand rests on my thigh the entire drive, a constant reassuring presence. The warehouse is exactly what I expected, all concrete and shadows and men with guns who nod respectfully at Dante as we enter. And he keeps me close to his side as we walk through the space, and I can feel my heart pounding as we approach a door in the back. And Dante stops and turns to me and cups my face in his hands and says, "You don't have to do this. We can leave right now, and I'll handle him my way. But if you need this closure, then I'll be right there with you. And nothing he says can hurt you anymore because you're mine now, and I protect what's mine." And I nod and take a deep breath and tell him I'm ready. Marcus is sitting in a chair in the middle of an empty room, and he looks terrible, his face bruised, and his expensive clothes dirty and torn. And when he sees me, his eyes go wide with a mixture of hope and fear, and he starts talking immediately. words tumbling out in a desperate rush about how he's sorry, how he never meant to hurt me, how he was dealing drugs because he had gambling debts and he needed the money. And I listened to him make excuses and try to manipulate me one more time, and I realize that I feel nothing. No anger or sadness or even satisfaction at seeing him like this. Just a kind of empty relief that I'm finally seeing him clearly, without the distortion of love or hope or denial clouding my judgment. I tell Marcus that I hope he gets his life together, that I hope he learns to be a better person, but that I'm done being his emotional punching bag, done letting him make me feel like I'm not enough. And I can see in his eyes that he still doesn't really understand, still thinks this is just another fight that he can smooth over with the right words, and he opens his mouth to respond, but then he sees the way Dante's hand is resting possessively on my lower back, sees the marks on my neck from Dante's mouth this morning, and his face goes pale with the realization that I've actually moved on, that I'm with someone else now, someone infinitely more dangerous than him. Dante tells Marcus in a voice like ice that he's being released with a warning, that he has 24 hours to leave the city and never come back, that if he ever tries to contact me or deal drugs in Dante's territory again, he'll disappear in a way that ensures he's never found. And Marcus is nodding frantically, agreeing to everything. And as we turn to leave, he calls out my name one last time, and I look back and he says, "He's going to hurt you, Arya. Guys like him don't know how to do anything else. And when he does, I hope you remember that I tried to warn you." And I see Dante's entire body go rigid with rage, see his hand move toward the gun I know he's carrying. But I grab his arm and shake my head and say that Marcus isn't worth it, that his opinion doesn't matter to me anymore. And the way Dante visibly forces himself to calm down for me, the way he chooses my wishes over his instinct for violence, makes me feel more powerful than any words Marcus ever said. We drive back to the penthouse in silence, Dante's jaw clenched and his hands tight on the steering wheel. And I can tell he's still angry about what Marcus said, still wanting to go back and make him pay for planting seeds of doubt in my mind. But when we pull into his private garage and he turns to look at me, I lean across the console and kiss him, pouring everything I can't quite say into the press of my lips against his, and he responds immediately, his hand sliding into my hair, his mouth opening under mine, and the kiss turns hungry and desperate. All the tension from the day, finding an outlet in the slide of tongues and the scrape of teeth. We barely make it inside the penthouse before Dante has me pressed against the wall of the elevator, his body covering mine, his hands everywhere, and I'm tugging at his shirt trying to get it off, trying to feel his skin against mine. And he's murmuring in Italian between kisses, words I don't understand but that sound like prayers or promises or both. And when the elevator doors open into his penthouse, he lifts me easily, my legs wrapping around his waist. And he's carrying me toward his bedroom, and I'm kissing his neck and breathing in the scent of him. And just as he's lowering me onto his massive bed, just as his hands are sliding under my sweater, his phone rings with a tone I haven't heard before, sharp and urgent. And he freezes above me, his eyes meeting mine with frustration and something darker, something that looks like fear. Dante answers the phone and the blood drains from his face as he listens to whoever is speaking. And when he ends the call, he's already moving, pulling away from me and grabbing a gun from his nightstand. And he tells me in a voice that's shaking slightly, barely controlled, that the Baldinis have taken someone important to him, someone he loves more than anything in the world. And I feel my stomach drop with dread as he continues, his words coming out harsh and desperate. "They took my sister, Sophia. She's only 16, and they're demanding I give them you in exchange. They want me to choose between the woman I've claimed and the only family I have left." And I watch his face crumble with an anguish that's devastating to witness. And all I can think is that I've brought this nightmare into his life, that my impulsive kiss has put an innocent girl in danger, and before I can stop myself, I'm saying the words that will either save us all or get me killed. "Use me as bait, Dante. Let me help you get Sophia back." Dante Moretti is going to trade me to his enemies to save his sister. And I should be terrified, should be planning my escape from this penthouse and this life and this man who's dragged me into a world of violence that I'm completely unprepared for. but instead I find myself saying the words that will either save us all or get me killed. Use me as bait. But let me help you get Sophia back. And the way Dante looks at me in that moment, with shock and something that might be awe mixed with absolute terror at the thought of putting me in danger, makes me realize I've stopped being his captive or his obsession and become his partner. And more than that, I've become someone who's willing to risk everything for the people he loves, because somewhere in the past 48 hours, I've started to care about this dangerous, beautiful man more than I care about my own safety. Dante's immediate response is to shake his head violently and say absolutely not. There's no way in hell he's using me as bait. He'll find another way to get Sophia back. He'll give the Baldinis money or territory or whatever they want, but he won't risk me. And I can see the desperation in his steel-gray eyes, the way his hands are shaking slightly as he runs them through his dark hair. And I realize that this is what real fear looks like on a man who's spent his entire adult life cultivating an image of controlled power and absolute confidence. And it breaks my heart to see him like this, torn between the sister who's been his responsibility since their father died and the woman he's known for less than 2 days, but somehow can't bear to lose. I take his face in my hands the way he's done to me so many times since last night, forcing him to look at me, to really see me. And I tell him that the Baldinis don't know I'm not really his weakness yet, that I've been in his life less than 48 hours, and they're making assumptions based on the public claiming at the club, and we can use that confusion against them. We can make them think they're getting what they want, while Dante and his men are actually setting a trap. And I watch him process my words, watch the Mafia boss reassert control over the terrified older brother, and he pulls me against his chest so hard I can barely breathe, and he whispers against my hair in Italian, something that sounds like a prayer. And then he's kissing me desperately, like he's trying to memorize the taste of me in case this is the last time. And when we finally break apart, he's looking at me with an intensity that steals my breath, and he says, "If anything happens to you, if they hurt you, I will burn this entire city to the ground and salt the earth where it stood. Do you understand me, Arya? You've become everything to me in 2 days, and I don't know how to process that, but I know I can't lose you." His confession makes my chest tight with emotions I'm not ready to name, makes me understand that whatever this is between us has gone far beyond attraction or circumstance. And I kiss him again, softer this time, trying to convey without words that I trust him, that I believe he'll keep me safe. And then we're moving into action mode because apparently we only have a few hours before the exchange is supposed to happen at midnight. And Dante is calling his most trusted people, his voice shifting back into that tone of absolute authority that makes grown men snap to attention. And within 20 minutes, his penthouse is filled with dangerous-looking men in expensive suits, all of them watching me with curiosity and varying degrees of concern about their boss's plan to use his new woman as bait. Dante's second-in-command, Luca, who I'm learning is actually his cousin, and has been with him since they were teenagers building this empire from the ashes of their father's war, takes me aside while Dante is coordinating with his men. And Luca studies me with dark eyes that miss nothing, and he says in accented English that's better than my Italian will ever be. He's never cared about a woman like this before, never let anyone matter enough to be vulnerable, and I need to know that you're not going to get him killed by being a liability, that you can handle what's about to happen tonight, because if you can't, then you need to tell me now and I'll find another way. I understand that Luca is protecting Dante, that his loyalty runs deeper than blood, and I respect him for being willing to question me, to make sure I'm not going to fall apart when things get dangerous. And I tell him honestly that I'm terrified, but I'm also determined, that Sophia doesn't deserve to suffer because I kissed her brother, and that I'll follow Dante's instructions exactly because I trust him to know how to navigate this world that I'm still learning. And Luca must see something in my face that satisfies him because he nods slowly and says, "Maybe you're good for him after all. Maybe you're the person who can remind him that there's more to life than revenge and power and building walls so high that nobody can hurt him. But if you break his heart, I'll make you disappear in ways that will ensure nobody ever finds you." And the casual threat delivered with a slight smile makes me understand that Luca isn't joking, that his loyalty to Dante supersedes any concern for my well-being. And strangely, I find that comforting, because it means Dante has people who love him enough to threaten on his behalf. Dante spends the next hour preparing me for what's going to happen, explaining that I'll be wearing a tracking device so small I won't even feel it, hidden in a piece of jewelry that looks expensive but is actually a sophisticated piece of technology that will let his men follow me anywhere. And he shows me a tiny knife that fits, in a special pocket sewn into the designer jeans he had delivered earlier, positioned so I can reach it quickly if I need to, and he personally teaches me how to defend myself in the limited time we have, his hands correcting my stance, showing me where to strike if someone grabs me, his voice low and urgent in my ear as he explains that the goal isn't to win a fight, but to create enough chaos that his men can get to me, and the intimacy of learning violence from him, of feeling his body guide mine through movements designed to hurt and disable, creates a strange bond between us that's both disturbing and deeply arousing. Between the preparation sessions, while Dante is coordinating logistics with his team, I find myself alone in his bedroom, staring out at the city below and thinking about how drastically my life has changed in less than 2 days. How I went from being a freelance graphic designer whose biggest problem was a toxic ex-boyfriend to being the woman who's about to walk into a trap set by the Mafia's enemies. And I should be having a complete breakdown, should be crying or panicking or demanding to be taken to the police. But instead, I'm thinking about Sophia, this 16-year-old girl I've never met, who's probably terrified right now, wondering if her brother is going to save her, or if she's going to die because she had the misfortune of being related to someone powerful. And I realize that I can't walk away from this, can't let an innocent girl suffer because I made an impulsive decision that had unintended consequences. Dante finds me standing at the window, and he wraps his arms around me from behind, pulling my back against his chest. And we stand there in silence for a moment, just breathing together. And then he starts telling me about Sophia, about how she's smart and funny and wants to be a doctor, how she's the only person who can make him laugh when he's in one of his dark moods, how their mother died giving birth to her, and their father was murdered when she was only 6, and Dante has been raising her ever since, trying to give her a normal life despite the violence of his world, and I can hear the love and fear in his voice, can feel how tightly he's holding me like I'm the only thing keeping him grounded, and I turn in his arms and promise him that we're going to get her back, that I'll do whatever it takes. And he kisses me with a desperation that tastes like goodbye, even though neither of us wants to acknowledge the possibility that this might be the last time we touch like this. Before we leave for the exchange, Dante takes me back to the room that was his mother's art studio, and he shows me a painting I didn't notice earlier, a portrait of a young woman with dark hair and gray eyes that are unmistakably Sophia, and he tells me his mother painted it 2 weeks before she died, like she somehow knew she wouldn't be there to watch her daughter grow up. And he needs me to see Sophia's face, needs me to understand exactly who we're fighting for tonight. And I study the painting, memorizing every detail of this girl who's already lost so much. And I make a silent promise to the woman who painted her that I'll help bring her daughter home safely. The drive to the exchange location feels both endless and far too short, and Dante's hand is gripping mine so tightly I'm losing circulation, but I don't complain, because I know he needs the contact, needs to feel me solid and real beside him for as long as possible. And he keeps giving me instructions, reminding me to stay calm, to look for Sophia first, to remember that he and his men will be watching from hidden positions all around the location. And I nod and try to look more confident than I feel. And when we pull up to the abandoned dock where the exchange is supposed to happen, the place is lit by harsh industrial lights that cast long shadows across the water, and I can see figures moving in the darkness, and my heart is racing so fast, I think it might actually burst out of my chest. Dante kisses me one more time before I have to get out of the car, and this kiss is different from all the others. It's tender and desperate and full of all the things we haven't had time to say to each other, and when he pulls back, his eyes are bright with unshed tears, and he tells me in Italian, Ti amo, Aria. And even though I don't speak the language, I know what it means. And I'm about to say it back when Luca taps on the window and says it's time. And I have to force myself to let go of Dante's hand, to step out of the safety of the car and walk toward the men who want to use me to hurt him. The walk across the dock feels like it takes hours, even though it's probably only 30 seconds. And I'm trying to remember everything Dante taught me, trying to look scared but not too scared, trying to find Sophia in the shadows ahead of me. And then I see her. A young girl with long dark hair and her brother's gray eyes, tied to a chair near the edge of the dock. And she's crying, but trying to be brave. And when she sees me approaching, her eyes go wide with confusion because she has no idea who I am or why I'm here. And I want to run to her, want to tell her it's going to be okay. But I know I have to play this right, or we're both going to end up dead. Antonio Baldini steps out of the shadows, and he's exactly what I expected. A cruel-looking man in his 50s with cold eyes and a smile that makes my skin crawl, and he's flanked by at least 6 men that I can see, all armed, all watching me with expressions that range from curiosity to open hostility. And Antonio circles me slowly like a predator assessing prey, and he reaches out to touch my hair, and I have to force myself not to flinch, not to show fear, because Dante told me that men like this feed on fear, that showing weakness makes them more dangerous. And so I look Antonio directly in the eyes, and I say in the steadiest voice I can manage, "I'm here like you demanded. Now let Sophia go." Antonio laughs, a sound that makes my stomach turn, and he tells me that I'm even prettier up close, that he can see why Dante claimed me so publicly. And his hand moves to my face, and I can smell cigarettes and expensive cologne and something underneath that smells like decay. And he says that maybe he'll keep us both, that having Moretti's sister and his woman would give him all the leverage he needs to take over the entire city. And I see Sophia's eyes widen with terror, see her start to struggle against her bonds, and I know in that moment that Antonio never intended to let either of us go, that this was always going to end in violence. And I'm trying to figure out how to signal to Dante that the plan has changed when I hear Sophia scream my name in warning. I spin around just in time to see one of Antonio's men rushing at me with a knife, and my body moves on instinct, using the defensive moves Dante taught me just hours ago, and I manage to dodge to the side, and my hand is reaching for the small knife hidden in my jeans, and everything is happening so fast. Chaos erupting around me as I hear gunfire and see Dante's men emerging from their hidden positions. And Antonio is shouting orders and grabbing for me, and I'm slashing at him with my little knife, not trying to kill, but just trying to create distance. And then there are hands on me, dragging me backward, and I'm fighting and screaming and trying to get to Sophia, who's still tied to that chair dangerously close to the edge of the dock. I manage to break free from whoever was holding me, my elbow connecting with something soft that makes a man grunt in pain, and I'm running towards Sophia, my hands working at the ropes that bind her. And she's looking at me with absolute terror and confusion, and I'm telling her my name, telling her that Dante sent me, that we're getting out of here, and I finally get her hands free, and we're both struggling with the ropes around her ankles when I hear Dante's voice behind me, roaring my name with absolute fury and fear, and I look up just in time to see Antonio Baldini standing in front of us, with a gun pointed directly at my head. Antonio's face is twisted with rage, and there's blood running down his arm from where I cut him, and he's saying something about how Moretti's whore thought she could trick him, thought she was clever. And Sophia is screaming, and I can hear Dante shouting my name and the sound of running footsteps. And I know with absolute certainty that Dante is too far away, that he can't reach me in time, that Antonio is going to pull that trigger and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. And I find myself thinking that at least I tried. At least I didn't let fear control me. At least I spent my last moments trying to save an innocent girl, instead of hiding in safety. And I watch Antonio's finger tighten on the trigger, and I close my eyes and wait for the impact. The gunshot is deafening, echoing across the water, but I don't feel any pain, don't feel anything except Sophia's trembling body pressed against mine. And when I open my eyes, Antonio is staring down at his wrist in shock, because someone has put a bullet through it, and his gun is falling from his useless hand into the dark water below, and I spin around looking for Dante, looking for whoever just saved my life. And what I see makes absolutely no sense because standing about 20 feet away with a smoking gun in his shaking hands is Marcus, my toxic ex-boyfriend who should be halfway to whatever city he fled to. And his eyes meet mine across the chaos, and there's something in his expression that might be genuine remorse for the first time ever. Marcus lowers his gun slowly and takes a step toward me, and I can see Dante's men surrounding him immediately, their weapons trained on him, waiting for orders, and Marcus ignores them all, his attention focused entirely on me, and he says in a voice that's barely audible over the sounds of fighting still happening around us, "I couldn't let him kill you, Arya. I've done a lot of terrible things. I've hurt you in ways I'll never be able to take back, but I couldn't just leave the city knowing you were in danger. Couldn't live with myself if something happened to you because of the mess I created, so now we're even, and you'll never see me again, and I hope you find happiness with him, with Moretti, because even I can see that he looks at you the way I never did, like you're something precious that he'd die to protect." Before I can respond, before I can process what Marcus just said or what it means, Dante is there, his arms wrapping around me and Sophia, pulling us both against his chest, and he's checking us frantically for injuries, his hands running over our bodies, his voice shaking as he asks if we're okay, and I'm nodding and saying we're fine, we're both fine. And Sophia is crying and calling him by what must be an Italian nickname and clinging to him like she's afraid he'll disappear. And I watch over Dante's shoulder as Luca approaches Marcus and says something I can't hear. And Marcus nods and hands over his gun. And then he's being escorted away by 2 of Dante's men. And I realize I'll probably never know what happens to him, if Dante will keep his word about letting him go, or if saving my life earned Marcus a different fate. Dante finally pulls back enough to look at my face, his hands cupping my cheeks, and his eyes are bright with tears that are actually falling now, and he kisses me desperately, not caring that his sister and all his men are watching. And when he pulls back, he's pressing his forehead to mine and saying over and over in Italian and English that he loves me, that he thought he lost me, that watching Antonio point that gun at my head was the worst moment of his entire life. And I'm kissing him back and telling him I'm okay, we're both okay, and Sophia is watching us with wide eyes and a small smile despite her tears. And I realize that this 16-year-old girl just watched me risk my life for her, just saw her brother break down crying over a woman he's known for 2 days, and she's probably trying to figure out what the hell is happening. The sound of a single gunshot makes us all jump, and I turn to see that Antonio Baldini is on his knees, with Dante's gun pressed to the back of his head, and Luca is standing behind him looking at Dante with a question in his eyes, waiting for the order, and Dante gently releases Sophia and me, and walks over to Antonio, and his entire demeanor has changed. The vulnerable man who was just crying over me completely gone, and replaced by the cold Mafia boss that everyone fears, and he crouches down in front of Antonio and says something in Italian that makes the older man go pale. And then Dante stands and nods once, and Luca pulls the trigger without hesitation, and Antonio Baldini crumples to the dock. And I should be horrified, but instead I'm just relieved that he can't hurt Sophia or me or anyone else ever again. Dante comes back to us, and he's giving orders to his men about cleanup and securing the rest of the Baldini family. And then he's ushering Sophia and me toward the car, his arm around both of us. And Sophia is asking him a million questions about who I am and why I was there and what's going to happen now. And Dante tells her gently that he'll explain everything when we get home, that right now he just needs to get us both somewhere safe. And Sophia looks at me with those gray eyes that are so like her brother's, and she says quietly, "Thank you for coming for me. I don't know who you are, but thank you." And I tell her my name is Arya, and I'm someone who cares very much about her brother, and she smiles through her tears, and says she can tell, that she's never seen Dante look at anyone the way he looks at me. The drive back to the penthouse is quiet. Sophia curled up between Dante and me, exhausted from her ordeal, and Dante's hand finds mine over her head, his fingers lacing with mine. and when I look at him, I see something in his expression that takes my breath away because it's not just love or gratitude or relief. It's a kind of fierce determination, like he's made a decision about us, about our future. And when we finally make it back to his home and get Sophia settled in her room with reassurances that she's safe now, that Dante's men are posted outside and nobody is getting past them, he takes my hand and leads me to his bedroom. And the moment the door closes behind us, he's kissing me with an intensity that speaks of how close we came to losing everything. And I'm kissing him back with equal desperation. And we're pulling at each other's clothes, needing to feel skin against skin, needing to confirm that we're both alive and whole and together. And as we fall into his bed, as his body covers mine, as he looks down at me with those storm-gray eyes full of love and need and possessive certainty, he tells me that he's never letting me go, that what we have is forever, and I believe him because I've seen what Dante Moretti is willing to do for the people he loves, and I know with absolute certainty that I'm one of them now, that I belong to this dangerous, beautiful man as completely as he belongs to me. 3 weeks after Marcus saved my life and disappeared into whatever future Dante decided to give him, after Dante Moretti held me so tight in the aftermath of that bloody night on the docks that I could barely breathe, after I watched him execute Antonio Baldini with a single shot, and no mercy in those steel-gray eyes, I'm standing in Dante's office wearing his shirt, and nothing else while he conducts business calls in Italian, and I finally understand that I'm not his captive or his obsession anymore. I'm the woman who owns the heart of the most dangerous man in the city, and I'm never letting go. Never walking away from this intense, consuming love that terrifies me as much as it completes me. The aftermath of that night has been a whirlwind of changes that I'm still trying to process, starting with the fact that the Baldini family has been systematically dismantled, their organization absorbed into Dante's empire or eliminated entirely, and an uneasy peace has settled over the city's underworld as everyone recalibrates their understanding of power, now that Dante has proven once again why he's the man they all fear and respect. And I've learned that in his world, mercy is seen as weakness, and the brutal efficiency with which he eliminated the threat to his family is exactly what maintains the fragile order that keeps even more bloodshed from erupting in the streets. Sophia has become a constant presence in our lives, this brilliant, fierce 16-year-old who recovered from her kidnapping with a resilience that I find both inspiring and heartbreaking. And she's attached herself to me with an intensity that suggests she's been starving for female guidance and companionship, always asking me questions about everything from makeup to college to what it's like being with her intimidating older brother. And I've found myself slipping into this role I never expected, becoming something between a friend and a mentor, and maybe eventually a sister. And watching Dante with Sophia, seeing how gentle and patient he is with her despite the violence he's capable of, makes me fall deeper in love with him every single day. I've moved into the penthouse officially. Not that there was ever really a question after that night. And my small studio apartment with its leaky faucet and temperamental heating has been professionally cleaned out. My belongings integrated into Dante's space in a way that makes it feel like our space now. My graphic design equipment set up in the room next to his office so I can work while he conducts business. And I've been surprised to discover that I can still function in my career, still meet deadlines, and create designs for clients who have no idea that I'm living with a Mafia boss. And there's something grounding about maintaining this connection to my old life, even as I build a new one in Dante's dangerous world. Jessica has been remarkably understanding about everything, probably because Dante assigned her a security detail after that first night when his enemies came after me. And she's taken to calling me at least 3 times a day to make sure I'm still alive and not being held hostage. And I have to keep reassuring her that I'm here by choice, that what Dante and I have is real, even if it started in the most chaotic way possible. And she came over for dinner last week and spent the entire evening watching how Dante looks at me, how his hand constantly seeks mine, how he gets this soft expression that apparently nobody else has ever seen. And when she left, she hugged me tight and whispered that she's never seen me this happy, this alive. And maybe sometimes the best love stories start with impulsive decisions and dangerous men. Dante has been slowly introducing me to the parts of his empire that aren't soaked in blood, taking me to his legitimate businesses, the restaurants and real estate developments and import companies that generate legal income and provide cover for the less legal activities. And I've met his key people, the ones who've been with him since he was 17 and fighting to hold together his father's fractured organization. And I can see them reassessing me, moving from skepticism to cautious acceptance as they watch how I handle myself, how I don't flinch from the truth of what Dante does, how I ask intelligent questions and remember names, and treat even the lowest-ranking member of his crew with respect. And I'm learning that earning loyalty in this world isn't about being perfect or fearless. It's about being genuine and standing by the people you claim to care about, even when things get dangerous. The nights are my favorite time, when the business is handled and the calls have stopped, and it's just Dante and me in his enormous bed with the city lights spread out below us like scattered diamonds, and he tells me things he's never told anyone. Secrets about his fears and regrets and dreams, about how he worries that Sophia will never forgive him for the violence she's been exposed to because of who he is, about how he sometimes wakes up expecting to find that I've left, that I've finally come to my senses, and realized that a normal life with a normal man would be safer and easier. And I tell him that I don't want safe or easy, that I want him with all his darkness and danger and devastating intensity. And he makes love to me like he's trying to prove that I'm real, that this is real, that somehow against all odds we found each other in the chaos. Today is different, though. Today Dante has been distracted all morning, checking his phone constantly, and having whispered conversations with Luca that stop abruptly when I enter the room. And I'm starting to wonder if there's new trouble brewing, if another rival family is making moves, if the peace of the past 3 weeks is about to shatter. But when I ask him about it, he just smiles mysteriously and tells me to get dressed in something nice because he has a surprise for me. And the last time Dante surprised me, it involved a private jewelry showing where he bought me a necklace that cost more than my annual income. So I'm both excited and slightly nervous about what he's planning. He drives us himself again, something he only does when he wants privacy, when he doesn't want even his most trusted men to know where we're going. And we leave the city behind, heading into the surrounding hills where massive estates sprawl across acres of manicured landscape. And I'm watching the scenery change from urban to suburban to almost rural. And I finally ask where we're going, and Dante reaches over to take my hand and says in that accent that still makes my stomach flip, "I want to show you something, Bella. Something I've been working on since the night you kissed me and changed everything." We pull up to a gate that opens automatically, clearly expecting us, and we drive up a long, winding driveway lined with ancient oak trees, and then I see it. A stunning modern house that somehow manages to blend contemporary architecture with classic elegance, all glass and stone and clean lines, and it's positioned to take advantage of views that stretch for miles. And Dante parks in front and comes around to open my door, and he's watching my face carefully as he says, "I bought this property 5 years ago, with some vague idea that maybe someday I'd want a place away from the city, somewhere safe and separate from the violence of my work. But I never did anything with it, because I had no reason to, no one to share it with. And then you walked into my life, and suddenly I could see a future I never let myself imagine before." He takes my hand and leads me through the front door into a space that's breathtaking in its simplicity. All open concept, with floor-to-ceiling windows that blur the line between inside and outside. And the furniture is carefully chosen, comfortable but elegant. And I can see Dante's taste throughout, but also touches that are clearly meant for me. A reading nook with built-in bookshelves, a studio space flooded with natural light that would be perfect for my design work, a chef's kitchen that's somehow both professional and homey. And as we walk through room after room, each more beautiful than the last, I'm starting to understand what he's showing me, what he's offering me, and my heart is pounding so hard I can feel it in my throat. We end up on a terrace that overlooks rolling hills and distant mountains, and the sun is starting to set. painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and deep purple. And Dante turns to me and takes both my hands in his, and I can see that he's nervous. This man who faces down rival criminals in life-threatening situations without flinching is actually nervous about what he's about to say. And he starts speaking in a voice that's rough with emotion. "Aria, 3 weeks ago you walked into my club wearing a black dress in desperation, and you kissed me without knowing who I was or what it would mean. And in that moment you gave me something I didn't even know I was missing. You gave me hope that someone could want me for myself, not for my power, or my money, or my name. And I know this has all happened impossibly fast. I know we've barely had time to process everything that's happened. But I also know with absolute certainty that I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy." He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small velvet box. And my breath catches because I know what's coming. But I can't quite believe it's happening. And when he opens the box, I see a ring that's absolutely perfect. A large diamond surrounded by smaller stones that catch the fading light and throw rainbows across his hands. And then Dante Moretti, the most dangerous man in the city, the Mafia boss who everyone fears and respects in equal measure, drops to one knee in front of me and says with tears actually visible in those steel-gray eyes, "Aria Bennett, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner, and the person I come home to every night? Will you let me spend the rest of my life protecting you, and loving you, and giving you everything you've ever wanted? Will you rule beside me and fill my dark world with the light you've brought to my life? Because I'm asking you to choose this. Choose me. Choose us, knowing full well what my world entails, and what being my wife will mean." I'm crying now, tears streaming down my face, and I'm nodding before he even finishes his carefully prepared speech, because of course the answer is yes. Of course I want this dangerous, beautiful life with him. Of course I want to wake up every morning to those intense gray eyes and fall asleep every night in his arms. And I'm saying yes over and over while he slides the ring onto my finger with hands that are shaking slightly. And then he's standing and pulling me into his arms and kissing me with a desperation and joy that takes my breath away, and I can taste salt from both our tears, and when we finally break apart, he's laughing and crying at the same time and saying in Italian, "Ti amo, ti amo, ti amo." And I'm responding in my terrible accent that makes him smile even through his tears, telling him I love him too, that I'll always love him, that I'm his forever. We stay on that terrace until the stars come out, wrapped in each other's arms, talking about the future in a way that makes it feel real and possible. And Dante tells me his vision for this house, how he wants it to be our sanctuary away from the city, a place where Sophia can visit and bring friends without worrying about security, a place where maybe someday we'll have children of our own who can run through these rooms and grow up with more innocence than he ever had. And I tell him about wanting to expand my design business, about maybe teaching Sophia some skills if she's interested, about creating a life that balances his world with mine. And he listens to everything with that intense focus he has. Like every word I say matters, like my dreams are as important as his empire. The wedding planning happens faster than I ever imagined possible. Because when you're Dante Moretti and you want something, obstacles simply cease to exist. And within 2 weeks, we're standing at his family estate. A sprawling property in the countryside that's been in the Moretti family for 4 generations. And the entire house has been transformed into something magical with thousands of white flowers and candles and elegant decorations that somehow honor tradition, while feeling modern and personal. And I'm in a dressing room with Jessica and Sophia, both of them crying as they help me into a custom-designed wedding gown that fits like it was painted onto my body. All delicate lace and silk that flows like water. And when I look at myself in the mirror, I barely recognize the confident, radiant woman staring back at me. Sophia keeps fussing with my veil, her fingers gentle and her eyes bright with happiness. And she tells me in a voice thick with emotion that she's so grateful I came into their lives, that she's watched her brother transform from someone who was slowly drowning in darkness and violence into someone who smiles and laughs and has hope for the future. And she says she's always wanted a sister, and now she's finally getting one. And I pull her into a careful hug, mindful of my dress and makeup. and I promise her that I'm not going anywhere, that she's stuck with me now, and she laughs through her tears and says that's exactly what she wanted to hear. Jessica applies one final touch of lipstick and steps back to assess me with the critical eye of a best friend who's known me through all my worst moments and lowest points. And she says quietly, "You know, when you told me you kissed a stranger to make Marcus jealous, I thought you'd officially lost your mind. I thought you were going to get yourself killed, or arrested, or at minimum embarrassed. But looking at you now, seeing how happy you are, I think maybe it was the sanest thing you've ever done. Maybe sometimes we have to do something completely reckless to find what we're really looking for." The ceremony is held in the estate's garden as the sun begins to set, and I walk down an aisle lined with Dante's entire organization. These dangerous men in expensive suits, who've seen and done terrible things, but who are watching me with genuine warmth and approval because they love their boss, and they can see that I make him happy. And at the end of the aisle is Dante in a perfectly tailored tuxedo that makes him look like every fantasy I never let myself have. And when our eyes meet across the distance, his entire face transforms with a smile so pure and joyful that it takes my breath away. And I know that every person watching can see how completely we belong to each other. Luca is standing beside Dante as his best man, and he gives me a subtle nod of approval as I reach them. This man who threatened to make me disappear if I hurt his cousin now fully on board with our relationship. And the officiant begins speaking, but I barely hear the words because I'm lost in Dante's eyes, in the intensity of his gaze that promises forever. And when it's time for vows, Dante takes my hands and speaks in a voice that's steady despite the emotion I can see in his face. "Aria, you kissed me to make another man jealous, but you ended up making me yours forever. And I promise to love you with the same intensity that you've brought into my life, to protect you with everything I have, to give you the safe harbor you've never had, and to spend every day proving that you made the right choice when you chose me and this life. And I promise that while my world will always have darkness in it, you will always be my light." My vows are simpler but no less heartfelt, and I tell him through tears that are streaming down my face that I choose him, that I'll always choose him, that I'm not afraid of his darkness because I understand that it's part of what makes him who he is, and I promise to stand beside him through whatever comes, to love him fiercely and completely, to build a life with him that honors both where we came from and where we're going. And by the time I finish, we're both crying openly, and the officiant has to clear his throat several times before he can pronounce us husband and wife. And when Dante kisses me, it's tender and passionate and full of promise. And the crowd erupts in applause, and I hear Sophia cheering loudest of all. The reception is everything I never knew I wanted. A perfect blend of elegance and warmth, with food that would make Giovanni proud, and music that ranges from classical to contemporary. And I dance with Dante while everyone watches, his arms secure around me, his mouth near my ear as he whispers all the things he's going to do to me later when we're finally alone, and I laugh and blush and hold him tighter. And then I dance with Luca, who surprises me by saying welcome to the family with genuine affection. And I dance with Sophia, who's already planning how often she can visit our new house. And through it all, I feel Dante's eyes on me, watching me like I'm the most precious thing in his world. And I suppose I am. As the night winds down, and we prepare to leave for our honeymoon, which Dante has kept deliberately mysterious, despite my attempts to extract information, I stand with him on the terrace overlooking the estate grounds, and we watch our guests mingling below, this strange, beautiful family we've built from blood and loyalty and choice. And Dante pulls me close and says, "Do you have any regrets, Bella? Any second thoughts about choosing this life? About becoming Aria Moretti?" And I turn in his arms to face him, to make sure he can see the absolute certainty in my eyes, and I tell him the truth that's been crystallizing in my heart since that first impulsive kiss. "I kissed the Mafia boss to make my toxic ex jealous," I say, echoing the beginning of our story, letting my fingers trace the strong line of his jaw. But what happened next wasn't shocking at all. "You loved me the way I always deserved to be loved. fiercely and completely and without reservation. And you gave me a family I didn't know I needed, and a future I never let myself imagine. And you showed me that sometimes the most reckless decisions lead to the most beautiful destinations. And I would kiss you 1,000 times over, in every lifetime, in every universe, because you're my home now, Dante. You're my safety, and my adventure, and my forever. And nothing, not exes or rival families or the danger that comes with your name, will ever take that away from us. Dante kisses me then, slow and deep and full of everything we've survived and everything we're building together. And when we break apart, he's looking at me with such love and wonder that I know I made the right choice, that this dangerous, beautiful man is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And as we leave the reception to begin our life together, as we drive away from the estate with Sophia waving goodbye and Jessica blowing kisses and Luca already on his phone coordinating whatever business can't wait even one day, I think about the woman I was just 3 weeks ago, desperate and broken and using a stranger to make a point. And I barely recognize her now because she couldn't have imagined this ending, couldn't have dreamed that one impulsive kiss would lead to the greatest love of her life. And I realize that sometimes fate doesn't wait for you to be ready. Sometimes it just shoves you toward your destiny in the form of a handsome stranger in an expensive suit. And all you can do is hold on tight and trust that the fall will be worth it. And as Dante's hand finds mine in the darkness of the car, and he brings it to his lips to kiss my wedding ring, I know with absolute certainty that my fall was worth everything, that choosing Dante Moretti was choosing life in its most intense and beautiful form. And I'm ready for whatever comes next because I'm no longer alone in the darkness. I have a dangerous man beside me who would burn the world down before he let anything hurt me. And that kind of love, fierce and consuming and absolutely unbreakable, is worth every risk I took to find it.